always the ruling elite that determines the parameters of rebellion. When Conrad Black wrote his biography of Roosevelt, he said that Roosevelt's greatest achievement was that he saved capitalism. The New Deal functioned the way liberal institutions are supposed to function in a democratic capitalist society, as a kind of safety valve. It makes incremental and piecemeal reform possible. Those institutions have been destroyed by corporate capitalism in their myopia, because ultimately they, in essence, have destroyed not only their own legitimacy, but ultimately their own viability. And in all of the movements that I covered, you never know what triggers it. It's usually something incredibly banal. But the fact that the state decided to respond to the Occupy movement not by instituting minimal reforms, such as a massive jobs program, especially targeted at people under the age of 25, or a moratorium on foreclosures and bank repossessions, or a forgiveness of student debt, or the public option, which Obama and the insurance companies killed for us. The fact that the only message that it delivered was the message of force means that they have determined that rebellion is not going to go away. And these, if you watch the trajectory of any movement, it doesn't move in a kind of linear progression upwards. Even the civil rights movement, you know, great failures in Albany, Mississippi, and everywhere else. King trying to hold this fractured, group together. What has been unleashed, I think, can't be stopped. And just as 1905 was the dress rehearsal in Petrograd for 1917, just as the Stamp Act Rebellion in 1765 was the dress rehearsal for 1776, that moment when the federal authorities stepped in a concerted and organized effort to wipe out these encampments, for me, delivered the message. And that is that we have unleashed forces within this society that will confront these corporate systems of power. But what will spark it? It may be just an elderly woman in Utah being pushed out of her home. It will be something that seemingly insignificant that will tip people over the edge. And that's certainly what I saw in all of the movements that I covered. And let me just finally conclude by saying that the importance, and I've been down in Zuccotti, I was down there a few weeks ago with Father Daniel Berrigan, 92 years old. You know, the importance of continuing acts of resistance is that it keeps this narrative alive. When I was in Prague, I covered the Velvet Revolution in Prague. There were, through all the streets of the city, posters of a Charles University student named Jan Panic, who, to protest the Soviet invasion of Prague and the overthrow of Dubček in '68, had gone to Wenceslas Square, lit himself on fire, died 4 days later of his burns. Thousands of students marched with his body to the cemetery. It was broken up by the police. It was not reported on the state media. When his grave became a shrine, the communist authorities dug up his remains, cremated them, gave the ashes to his mother, and said that she was not allowed to rebury them. And his presence in the city that November and December was palpable. 2 weeks after the communist government fell, 10,000 people crowded into Red Army Square and renamed it Jan Panic Square. I was also there, 500,000 people, Wenceslas Square, snowing on a December night, when Marta Kubashaya, who had been, before 1968, the best-known singer in Czechoslovakia, and when the tanks rolled into the city, sung the anthem of defiance, broadcast over the radio. Once the pro-Soviet government was back in place, not only did she become a non-person, but they destroyed her entire recording stock, and she was not allowed to appear on the airwaves. From that moment until the Velvet Revolution, she had worked on an assembly line at a toy factory. And she walked out that night and sang that anthem, and everyone in that crowd knew every word. The power of resistance as Havel says in his great 1978 essay, The Power of the Powerless, is that we speak a fundamental truth about this system that terrifies them.